Imagine sending your 14-year-old daughter out to walk the neighbor's dog on a Saturday afternoon. It's just 300 yards from your home. A simple favor. She'll be back in 20 minutes. But 20 minutes pass. Then 30. Then an hour. And when you finally go looking for her, you find your daughter's body in a field, her throat savagely cut, her life stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. This nightmare became reality for one family in the quiet suburb of Exeter, England, on November 15, 1997. Kate Bushell was just 14 years old, bright, popular, full of dreams and potential. And in the time it takes to walk a dog, she encountered pure evil. What makes this case even more chilling? Someone saw a blood-soaked man running from the scene. Police found orange fibers. Witnesses spotted a mysterious blue vehicle. And yet, 27 years later, Kate's killer walks free. Somewhere out there, someone knows who murdered Kate Bushell. Someone is keeping a terrible secret. And today, we're going to examine every detail of this haunting case. Because justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. Stay with me. Because the story you're about to hear will change how you think about evil hiding in plain sight. Saturday, November 15th, 1997. For 14-year-old Kate Bushell, the day started like any typical weekend for a teenager. She slept in after a long week at St. Thomas High School in Exeter, Devon. Kate was a good student with big aspirations. She wanted to go to Oxford University. She had her whole life mapped out ahead of her. That morning, Kate and her mother Suzanne headed into Exeter city centre. Kate needed to do some research at the library for a school homework project. After completing her work, they did some shopping together. Kate bought a CD from Virgin Megastore, one of her favorite bands. They also picked up some birthday presents for Kate's older brother Tim, whose birthday was coming up soon. It was a perfectly normal mother-daughter day, shopping, talking, making plans. By the time they returned home to their house on Barrata Drive in Exeter, a quiet suburb on the western edge of Exeter, it was mid-afternoon. Now, here's where a simple act of kindness would lead to unimaginable tragedy. Kate's neighbors had gone away for the weekend and they'd asked Kate to walk their Jack Russell Terrier, Gemma. It was something Kate had done many times before. The route was familiar. The area was safe, or so everyone thought. It was broad daylight on a Saturday afternoon in a residential area. At approximately 4:30 p.m., Kate left her home with Gemma. She walked up Exwick Lane, a narrow rural lane commonly used by dog walkers. Kate herself walked this route regularly. She knew every path, every style, every shortcut. The field where she was headed was mainly used as a cut-through to the nearby villages of Nadderwater and Whitestone, frequented by local dog walkers. At 4:50 p.m., Kate was last seen alive standing near a lay-by by some stables at the Whitestone cross end of Exwick Lane. Several witnesses would later report seeing her there with Gemma. But they also saw something else, something that would become crucial to the investigation. They saw a small blue car parked in the stable's lay-by, and they saw a man standing by it. A white man, aged between 30 and 40, of average build and height, clean-shaven with dark collar-length hair. When those same witnesses passed by again, just 5 minutes later, Kate was gone. The blue car appeared unattended, and a 14-year-old girl had just minutes to live. By 5:30 p.m., approximately 40 minutes after Kate was last seen alive, something caught the attention of people in the area. A small Jack Russell Terrier, believed to be Gemma, was seen running loose from a gateway in Exwick Lane at the base of the field. The dog was alone, frantic, without Kate. Kate's family began to worry. This wasn't like her. She should have been home by now. Her father, Jerry Bushell, went out to look for his daughter, walking the route he knew she would have taken. He walked down the country path, crossed the two stiles, made his way through the field toward Kinnerton Way, and then he saw her. Kate's body was lying in the field of Exwick Lane, just 300 yards from their home, just 700 yards from their front door, close enough that if she'd screamed, if she'd had time to cry out, they might have heard her. But Kate never had that chance. The sight that greeted Jerry Bushell was every parent's worst nightmare made horrifyingly real. His 14-year-old daughter, the girl who'd been shopping with her mother just hours earlier, the girl with dreams of Oxford and a bright future ahead, was dead. Her throat had been cut with such savage brutality that police would later say the killing suggested the perpetrator may have had prior experience in slaughtering animals. The weapon used was sharp, precise, and deadly. Police said Kate's throat had been cut with a sharp weapon, but the murder weapon was never found at the scene. The killer had taken it with them. Kate was found fully clothed, though some of her clothing had been disturbed. There were no obvious signs of sexual assault, though investigators couldn't rule out a sexual motive. Her body had not been concealed or hidden. The killer had simply left her there in the open field and fled. But here's what makes this case even more terrifying. Someone saw him leave. Between 5:10 p.m. and 5:40 p.m., a witness reported seeing a man running along a field behind an area called Norman's, coming from the direction of where Kate's body would be found. The witness said the man appeared to be running out of control, very fast, down the muddy, slippery hill before turning back into the estate. Running so fast, so desperately, as if fleeing from something, or running from what he'd just done. And here's the detail that should have broken this case wide open. Police believed the man would have been covered in blood. Kate's murder was brutal, violent, and close range. The kind of attack that would have left the perpetrator blood-soaked, visible, identifiable. But despite this witness sighting, despite the obvious state he would have been in, that man was never found. He never came forward, and he seemingly vanished into thin air. The discovery of Kate Bushell's body on that November evening in 1997 launched Operation Deacon, one of the largest and most extensive murder investigations ever conducted by Devon and Cornwall police. The case would eventually cost more than £1 million and consume thousands of hours of police work. Within hours, the scene was swarming with detectives. More than 160 detectives and staff were initially deployed to the case. The investigation was massive, unprecedented for the area, and driven by one terrifying reality. This appeared to be a stranger murder with a killer who could strike again at any moment. Lead Detective Mike Stevens made it clear that everyone on the inquiry team was deeply concerned that this murder might just be the start of the killer's attacks. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This wasn't a targeted killing of someone with enemies. This was an apparently random, motiveless murder of a child, and that made it exponentially more dangerous. The investigation moved with incredible speed and thoroughness. More than 5,000 house-to-house interviews were conducted in the Exeter and Exeter area. Police took over 5,000 DNA samples from individuals. Nearly 4,000 statements were recorded. 4,400 house-to-house inquiries were completed. 300 exhibits were catalogued and examined. Even Gemma, the Jack Russell Terrier Kate had been walking, was forensically examined in case she carried any trace evidence from the killer. Police left no stone unturned. They examined the theory that the killer might have had military training or worked in an abattoir, given the precision and brutality of the throat wound. Serving and former members of the armed forces were examined. Those who had training as butchers or worked in slaughterhouses were investigated. Every known sex offender in the area was looked at and eliminated. Just 2 days after Kate's murder, on November the 18th, around 3,000 Exeter City football fans paid silent tribute to her. 2,000 posters were distributed by local press. Rewards totaling $7,000 were offered for information. The community was galvanized, horrified, and desperate for answers. On November 22nd, detectives staged a reconstruction of Kate's last movements, retracing her final journey with incredible detail. A 2-minute video of the reconstruction was screened in TV shop windows and at supermarkets around Exeter. The case was featured on Crime Watch in January 1998, described as one of those murder cases that strike a nervous chord across the nation. And here's what's chilling. The Crime Watch appeal warned viewers that unless someone could help identify the killer, he might not be caught until he struck again. They literally told the nation that this appeared to be the kind of murder committed by a repeat offender. The question was, would they be right? Let's talk about what police knew, what they found, and why it should have led them to Kate's killer, but somehow didn't. First, there were those orange fibers. Bright orange fibers were found on Kate's body and on a nearby country stile. These weren't common fibers. They came from material predominantly used in non-fluorescent workwear, such as boiler suits, aprons, and gloves. The kind of thing worn by laborers, mechanics, or tradespeople. To this day, police continue to appeal for anyone who knew someone who owned such orange clothing in 1997 to come forward. Someone, somewhere, remembers that distinctive orange clothing. Someone might have seen it go missing or be destroyed after November 15, 1997. Then there was the vagrant. In mid-September 1997, just 2 months before Kate's murder, a local resident began noticing an unknown man in the area. The man was described as wearing a long, checky brown coat with a big collar that was very tight to his neck. He had long, straggly hair. He was between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet tall, aged between 30 and 40. The witness said he got the impression the man had been sleeping rough in the area. The vagrant was seen around the area several times, always wearing that same big coat, even when it was hot outside. Then, on the evening of Wednesday, November the 12th, 1997, just 3 days before Kate's murder, the local resident was again walking his dog down the lane when the vagrant suddenly came out from behind trees and startled him. This was only half a mile from Kate's home, on a lane she regularly walked down. After Kate's murder, this vagrant was never seen again. He never came forward. He was never identified. He simply disappeared. Then there's the man by the blue vehicle. The witnesses who saw Kate alive at 4:50 p.m. also saw this man, standing by a small blue car in the stable's lay-by, just 100 yards from where Kate would be murdered. When they passed again 5 minutes later, Kate was gone and the vehicle appeared unattended. Despite massive publicity, despite national media coverage, despite Crime Watch appeals, this man never came forward. Detective Mike Stevens said in November 1998, despite extensive publicity, this individual has failed to come forward and may clearly be Kate's killer. We have to conclude, after this period of time, the individual has something to hide. And finally, there's the blood-soaked man running from the scene. The witness who saw him described someone running out of control, desperately fleeing down a muddy hillside at high speed. Someone who would have been covered in blood, visibly disturbed, impossible to miss. 3 suspects were interviewed over the years and released without charge. None of them were the right person, and the case went cold. But here's where this story takes an even darker turn. Because Kate Bushell's murder might not have been an isolated incident. Investigators began to suspect they weren't looking for a one-time killer, they were looking for a serial killer. Less than a year after Kate's murder, on October 20th, 1998, another woman was killed in strikingly similar circumstances. Her name was Lynn Bryant. She was 41 years old, a mother of 2, and a grandmother. She lived in Ruin High Lanes on the Roseland Peninsula in Cornwall, about 75 miles from where Kate was killed. On that October afternoon, Lynn was walking her lurcher dog along an isolated lane near her home. At 2:30 p.m., her body was discovered by a tourist at the gateway to a field. She had been stabbed multiple times in the neck, throat, chest, and back. The attack was described as horrendous. Her dog was found unharmed beside her, just like Gemma had been found unharmed after Kate's murder. Like Kate, Lynn had not been sexually assaulted, though her clothing had been disturbed in a way that suggested a sexual motive. Like Kate, she had been attacked in broad daylight on an isolated lane while walking a dog. Like Kate, her murder appeared completely random and motiveless. Police pieced together Lynn's movements that day. At 1:05 p.m., she was at a petrol station, fueling her car and shopping. By 1:50 p.m., she was seen outside Ruin Methodist Chapel, talking to a man described as in his 30s, around 5 feet 9 inches tall, dressed in light clothing. This was just 100 yards from where her body would be found. By 2:30 p.m., she was dead. The similarities were too striking to ignore. Lead Detective Chris Boland said, "This was a planned murder. It was not about Linda Bryant. This is somebody who was looking for somebody in an isolated location. In other words, it wasn't personal. The killer wasn't targeting these specific women. He was targeting any woman who fit the opportunity. Alone, isolated, vulnerable." And then there's the detail that makes this case genuinely disturbing. 4 months after Lynn's murder, her missing glasses were found at the scene of her death. The area had been meticulously searched at the time of the killing. The glasses weren't there then, which means the killer had taken them, kept them, and then returned to the scene 4 months later to place them back. Why would a killer return to a crime scene? Experts say it's about reliving the experience, about power, about revisiting the moment of control and violence. It suggests someone with a deep psychological need to reconnect with their crimes. In early January 1999, there was another knife attack on a mother and her daughter while they walked their dog in a country lane in Netherton, near Newton Abbot in Devon. A man deliberately drove his car into them, held a knife to the daughter's throat, and tried to force them into his vehicle. They fought their way out. Devon and Cornwall police said the similarities between this incident and the two murders were too obvious to ignore. The potential connections don't stop there. There's the murder of Helen Fleet, a 66-year-old woman killed in March 1987 while walking her dog in Wallaby Woods in Weston-super-Mare. She was randomly killed, her dog left unharmed, and she was not sexually assaulted or robbed. That's 10 years before Kate's murder, but the pattern is the same. There's the murder of Julia Webb, killed while walking her dog in Sandyway, Cheshire on July 22, 1998. Police initially considered a link to Kate's case but ruled it out a month later. That case also remains unsolved. And in July 2000, a woman was stalked for more than 300 yards by a man carrying a 6-inch knife in Salcombe, Devon. Her dog barked at the man and he ran off. He had gotten out of a dark blue Volvo. Do you see the pattern emerging? Women, dogs, isolated locations, blue vehicles, knives, the West Country region of England, all within a span of years. Retired Detective Chris Clark has claimed that the murders of Kate Bushell, Lynn Bryant, and Helen Fleet could all be connected. If true, that would mean an unidentified serial killer operated in the West Country for over a decade, targeting women who were simply walking their dogs. The murders were described by investigators as pretty unique nationally and internationally. These weren't robberies gone wrong. These weren't crimes of passion. These were planned predatory attacks on vulnerable targets who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Lead Detective Mike Stevens warned after Kate's murder that this appeared to be the kind of crime committed by someone who would kill again. 1 month after the second Crime Watch appeal for Kate's case, Lynn Bryant was murdered. The warning had been horrifyingly accurate. So, where does the investigation stand today? 27 years after Kate Bushell's murder, police remain committed to finding her killer. On the 20th anniversary of Kate's death in 2017, Devon and Cornwall police launched an investigative review alongside a major public appeal. The review, led by Detective Superintendent Paul Bergen, generated 204 calls and messages into the incident room, identifying 10 new lines of inquiry. That information still plays a part in the investigation today. On the 25th anniversary in November 2022, detectives renewed their public appeal, urging people to come forward with vital clues. The response was significant. More than 40 pieces of new information were received from the UK public. Detective Constable Darren Webb said there are numerous lines of inquiry being developed by analytical staff, but they still require that crucial piece of information to lead them to the killer. Police continue to focus on several key elements: the blue vehicle seen in the lay-by, the 2 unidentified men seen near the scene, the vagrant spotted 3 days before the murder, and the source of those orange fibers. In the Lynn Bryant case, there was a breakthrough in October 2018. Police revealed that a partial DNA profile of the killer had been isolated during a 2016 forensic review. This profile can be used to eliminate suspects quickly. Police began retesting some of the 6,000 people who had their DNA taken in the original investigation. 3 suspects arrested in the initial investigation have now been forensically eliminated. But here's the frustrating reality. Despite all the evidence, despite the witnesses, despite the DNA profile in Lynn's case, no one has been charged. No arrests have been made. The killer or killers remain free. So what do we know about the person who killed Kate Bushell? What kind of individual commits this type of crime? Police said the murder was planned. It wasn't spontaneous. The killer used great control and ferocity. The location has huge significance because it's not common to anyone from outside the area. Detectives remain convinced that Kate's killer has local connections. They believe the killer may have lived locally or had links to friends and family members in Exeter. Think about what that means. This is someone who knew the area intimately, who knew the walking routes, who knew when dog walkers would be out, who knew the isolated spots where someone could be attacked without witnesses. This is someone who could control themselves enough to plan and execute a brutal murder in broad daylight, then flee the scene without being immediately caught. Someone who could carry on with their daily life afterward while hiding a terrible secret. The psychological profile suggests someone with previous violent offenses. Experts say offenders rarely commit a psychotic murder of this magnitude as a first offense. This was almost certainly not the killer's first crime. There were likely earlier assaults, earlier violence, a progression that built to this level of brutality. And here's what should keep everyone in Exeter and the surrounding areas awake at night. Unless this person is dead or incarcerated for other crimes, they're still out there, living among the community, perhaps working, perhaps even having a family, living a double life where on one side they're a normal citizen, and on the other, they carry the secret of having murdered a 14-year-old girl. Someone knows, someone suspects, someone has had inklings over the years. Maybe they noticed unusual behavior around the time of Kate's murder. Maybe they saw blood-stained clothing. Maybe they heard something that didn't quite add up. Maybe they're even watching this video right now, wrestling with their conscience. Kate's brother Tim Bushell, who was almost 16 at the time of her murder, has made repeated pleas over the years for anyone withholding information to come forward. Imagine what this family has endured. Kate's mother, who spent that last Saturday shopping with her daughter, buying CDs, making plans. Kate's father, who found his daughter's body in that field. Kate's brother, who lost his sister just before his 16th birthday. 27 years of not knowing. 27 years of seeing Kate's killer walk free. 27 years of wondering if the person who murdered their daughter and sister is still in the area, living a normal life while they live with unbearable grief. Kate's mother, Mary Gutierrez, speaking about the West Mesa murders years later in a different context, asked a question that resonates with every parent who has lost a child to violence. How could one person or anybody do this? That question haunts the Bushell family too. How could someone do this to a bright, innocent 14-year-old girl who was simply walking a neighbor's dog? The family has remained dignified throughout this ordeal, but they deserve answers. They deserve justice. They deserve to know that Kate's killer will face consequences for destroying their daughter's life and shattering their family forever. Kate Bushell would be 41 years old today if she'd lived. She might have graduated from Oxford as she dreamed. She might have had a career, a family, children of her own. She might have changed the world in her own way, but we'll never know what Kate could have become, because someone took all of that away from her on a November afternoon in 1997. This case remains one of the United Kingdom's most notorious unsolved murders. It's also one of the most solvable. There were witnesses. There's physical evidence. There's a DNA profile in the possibly connected Lynn Bryant case. Someone saw a blood-soaked man fleeing the scene. The pieces are there. They just need to be connected. Detective Inspector Rob Back said, The response and the interest from the public has been really good so far, with a number of fresh intelligence reports being reviewed by the crime team. However, we are still appealing for that crucial piece of new information. That crucial piece of information could come from you. Maybe you lived in Exeter in 1997. Maybe you knew someone who acted strangely after Kate's murder. Maybe you remember someone who owned orange workwear that suddenly went missing. Maybe you saw that blue car. Maybe you know who the vagrant was. Maybe you stayed silent out of misplaced loyalty, fear, or simply not thinking your information was relevant. But it is relevant. Every detail matters. Every memory could be the key that finally brings Kate's killer to justice. If you have any information about the murder of Kate Bushell, contact Devon and Cornwall Police or Crime Stoppers. There's still a reward available. More importantly, there's still a chance to do the right thing, to give a family the answers they deserve, to ensure that Kate Bushell is remembered not as an unsolved mystery, but as a girl who finally received justice. Somewhere, someone is keeping a secret. Somewhere, someone knows who killed Kate Bushell. And somewhere, that person needs to understand that it's never too late to come forward. It's never too late to do the right thing. Justice for Kate Bushell is still possible, but only if someone speaks up. Will that someone be you?